And I always say to them, like, this is how we're all born. We're not born to read. And, this man-made thing, this line and this other line, that's a T all of a sudden, and that's going to have meaning. So our brains don't know that. And every single person needs to be taught this code, that these letters, these squiggly lines represent sounds.
It's like a symbol.
Sound. Exactly.
Now, what is dyslexia? Hear from Stacey Roselli, the CEO and founder of the Reading Village, as she helps define what dyslexia is and how it affects 1 out of every 5 people. She also shares her own experiences and specialized training of working with children who have a unique learning style. So, let's do it.
Too many days in the darkness, without a glimpse of the light. Running tired and broken and scared, but I swear I'll never give up the fight. I see you broken and beat, head pulled down over your eyes. Every part of you wants to surrender, but darling, you were meant to survive. With every step.
Stacey, thanks for coming on today to chat.
Happy day to you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So the Reading Village, for people just hearing about you guys for the first time, can you kind of shed some light into the field that you guys try to focus on?
Absolutely. So my favorite job in the whole wide world is being a mommy. But then after being a mommy, my favorite job is teaching.
Love to hear that.
It's my favorite job is teaching reading. And so I was just very fortunate that over 20 years ago, I was placed in a situation that taught me how to teach reading. I went to NYU, I got an undergrad, I got a grad, and it didn't matter because I didn't know how to teach reading. And so about 10 years ago, my husband and I moved from New York to sunny Florida.
Awesome. I love to hear that.
Exchanged the shovel for flip-flops.
Yeah.
And I came here and I realized that there was such a need for teaching reading in a very specific way. And so I established the Reading Village. And I had gone back and forth on like, how do I, what do I want my business name to be? And I really do think that it takes a village. It takes a village to teach a child, and it takes a village to raise a child. So we are the Reading Village. We're a group right now. We're a group of about 12 women from the West Coast to the East Coast. And we're all a team of structured literacy educators. And our mission really is to help children and families overcome the difficulties that they feel when they learn that their child has dyslexia. We want to teach the skills for the children to be able to become confident readers, but more importantly, confident people. And we want to see the child first, really, before we see the student. And so we had one dad say to us, so do you teach confidence? And I was like, well, you don't actually teach confidence, but you have to gain confidence. And so I'm just very fortunate right now. The Reading Village is this team of very bright people. And I always surround myself with people who are smarter than me so I can really learn from them.
No, that's good. That's good. It's interesting that father had said that too, because confidence, I guess, kind of just comes. I mean, it comes so naturally, and you're never going to notice like, oh, I was, confident. I wasn't confident 5 seconds ago. Now I am. It's kind of just as a gradual time frame that takes. So it's interesting you said that, but it does. I mean, it really does, because you're just slowly getting better at something, especially from a kid's standpoint, where he originally probably, or he or she, the reader. Yeah, the reader is, I guess lands in your office or working with you because there is difficulty in reading. And I can only imagine that the frustrations that parent has gone through over and over and over again. And from a child's standpoint, not that it like black and white, what's going on, but you could just sense that your parent is just upset with something with you. You might take it on your shoulders as just, I'm the cause of this. They're upset. I don't want to read at this point because it's always a hassle. It causes them stress. And so then there's also like this development of, I don't want to even do it now. And then they land with you. So that is it's great that you're able to kind of build those children up, because eventually, I guess, when they start to learn reading, their confidence has grown even more than their peers.
Sometimes we have teachers saying, she's almost cocky now. And I'm like, that's amazing.
I love that. I love that. Going from where they were to cocky.
Almost overconfident, like, let me explain why there's an E at the end of that word.
Yeah. And you had brought up dyslexia. What for people hearing about that for the first time, I feel like we all know that we've heard of the word, but to get more specific, what exactly is dyslexia?
I think the answer actually depends on who you're asking. So if you ask a parent, you're going to get an answer with an emotional component to it. If you ask a teacher who has very little knowledge, and unfortunately, there are many teachers who don't have knowledge of what dyslexia is because of the lack of teacher training. But if you ask them, they might say, oh, it's when the kids get their B's and D's flipped. You hear that often. If you ask a child, and the answer would be different depending on the age. I had one 8-year-old go, dyslexia is my superpower. And one day I'm going to be really famous. And that's because that's how her mother presented it and her father presented it to her. So what is dyslexia? I'm going to read to you the definition from the International Dyslexia Association. Okay. I am an IDA board member, proud IDA board member of Florida. So I'll read to you. Dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin. It is characterized by difficulties with accurate and/or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. So what does that really mean? Learning to read is not natural. I mean, I remember when I first found this out, I'm like, really? It makes sense. And so when we see our moms and dads' faces, whether they're picking us like this, or they're picking us up and they're picking this up and they're turning them upside down, that's still the face of a mother and father, and that stays the same. We were born to speak to each other. You learn your native tongue. You listen to your mom and your dad and you say, mama, dada. Yeah. But no one taught you to say, this is called speaking. Okay, watch how I form my lips. No one ever taught you that. So when I first learned that it really has to do with how our brains are, like how we're born. And I always say to them, like, this is how we're all born. We're not born to read. And, this man-made thing, this line and this other line, that's a T all of a sudden, and that's going to have meaning. So our brains don't know that. And every single person needs to be taught this code, that these letters, these squiggly lines represent sounds.
It's like a symbol.
Sound. Exactly. If I may read to you, I thought this was really great. I had asked a friend of mine who is a parent of a dyslexic child and who's also an educator. Listen to the difference. Dyslexia is a learning difference that has variations, but it is marked by significant difficulty in reading. People who are dyslexic have brilliant minds. They just have a different way of thinking and a different path to learning how to read. So you see how different the answer was?
Yeah.
Many people you'll hear say that dyslexia is a disability and or a difference. And I remember so clearly one of my 9th grade students goes, I have dyslexia and it is a learning difference. And this is why. And she was very confident in using that term, learning difference. But when you don't use the term when you don't use the term disability, then you don't get funding from the state.
Don't get
support.
There's the politics behind it.
There is no politics here, though.
Yeah, exactly. That doesn't surprise me, but that I like that example that you gave with her, because that brought up. I watched a TED Talk that was very relatable to how that was a 9th grade student. You said the TED Talk I think was from a guy named Dean Bragonier, where he was discussing dyslexia not as a disorder but as a difficulty. If you were to taking into account what neurodiversity is, which is really interesting perspective, because neurodiversity moves away from the school of thought that categorizes things that as just being black and white. Like if it's not the quote unquote norm, then it must be then essentially defective if it's not normal. And with neurodiversity, he discussed dyslexia as just a neurobiological variation. So like in simple terms, like on the TED Talk, he was categorizing it as a variation rather than a disorder, where, for example, if you have black hair and I have blonde hair, that's a variation. And although if you were to come into my area, say most people where I live just happen to have blonde hair and you have black hair, I wouldn't classify you as defective, so that perspective. And I thought it was a really good productive way of discussing it, especially when you consider the sheer number of people who have it. It's very easy to start talking about things being a disorder when there's only like 1 or 2 people out of like 1,000 or way more that have it. But dyslexics are way more frequent than that. And he went on to discuss the neurobiological differences that someone who has dyslexia has, which really did make things make a lot of sense. And he had said that some significant cognitive advantages to having dyslexia, especially in the fields of entrepreneurship, engineering, architecture, the arts. And that started to make sense because people who have trouble reading have dyslexia, and our brains being contralateral, meaning our left side of our brain controls the right side of our body, and vice versa. Our right side of our brain controls the left side of our body. And what he was basically saying was dyslexics rely heavily on their right side of the brain rather than their left. They're more advantaged on the right side of their brain than the left side. And that's just happens to control our creativity, imagination, our intuition, and especially our artistic sides. And there's a famous artist named Picasso, who I thought was a great example of a dyslexic, where he really was able to tap into that artistic side, where he was able to see and use what people were throwing away. He was able to use and turn it into art because he had a deeper sense of what art is and what art could be, because he had dyslexic, because he was much more advantaged in that right side of his brain, and was able to understand people's perspectives that way. Because like at the end of the day, he ended the TED Talk with saying, basically, you shouldn't put yourselves into someone else's shoes. You should see how their brain works and go into like how their brain is structured. And then you would see things much more simpler and clear, and it would make sense. And I was like, mind blown out of like those couple of minutes I was listening to this, because it makes sense. And now dyslexics, I feel like do have an advantage because they know where their strengths are. They're advantaged, and where maybe you want to either not steer away from, but there's really severe advantages that they can take advantage of.
You bring up so many good points. And there are many researchers who say 1 in every 5 people have dyslexia. And dyslexia has nothing to do with intelligence.
That's 20%.
Yes, good math skills. There's typically students. So I have students who can do math way quicker than me. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And so growing up, those first graders, second graders, they come with baggage. Like I used to teach 4th graders for 12 years, and they come with such heavy baggage already. And they know that it's a difference. But at that point, it's not a great difference just yet, because everybody else is learning how to read and they're not. There's a great book, The David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell. And in one section, he wrote, you wouldn't wish dyslexia on a child, or would you? Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful?
Oh, does he?
He's dyslexic. However, in his video, if you watch a video on him, he'll say, I had dyslexia, which is not necessarily true. Yeah. But when you work he received intervention, and he actually cried in his interview. It was so good.
That's funny. But he lives like less than 10 minutes from me. I know exactly the building he lives. It's funny you bring him up, because I know exactly, I follow him, and I'm always seeing he always makes those videos. But sorry, go on.
That's okay. Dyslexia doesn't go away, but if you remediate and intervene at the right time, those neurological pathways are formed, and you connect the parts of the brain that you do need for reading. And I've been doing this for over 2 decades. And now I have these like grown men and women, uber successful. And they were in one of the most struggling reading classes when they were in 4th grade.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, because they're tapping into, especially in today's society, because today's society is a lot about creativity and making opportunities for yourself, and with entrepreneurship and creativity, like content creating and stuff, even as simple as that, not just you're doing the same job for about like 30 to 40 years, and then you're going to retire. So it actually, that feeds into kind of where we are going as a society. And I would love to hear a little bit from your perspective on some tactics that you're able to do with the children that you work with too, because you are a godsend for working with children who are having difficulty reading, because I can only imagine that parent staring at them going, it says door, say door, and you knowing it from a teacher's perspective, knowing exactly kind of where to go and how to tailor, a curriculum or some exercise for them. I'd love to hear what you help them with and how.
Sure. I would like to share also that Richard Branson, he connected with LinkedIn, and now you can put as an attribute, I'm a dyslexic thinker. And so that I share that story with all of my students. I thought that was important because you had mentioned entrepreneurship several times, and
yeah,
he's doing pretty well for himself.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So to answer your question, what are the best ways to work with students with dyslexia? The first thing is really meeting them where they are. So we offer a type of homeschool program. We don't really call it homeschooling, but it's an independent education. And we had a 6th grader come to us just almost a year ago now, and she couldn't spell the word yet. She just couldn't give us the sounds in the word yet, and she couldn't retrieve that it was a Y. And so I was speaking with some colleagues, and they're like, oh, so you're going to do like a 6th grade curriculum? And I go, no, I don't really care what grade she's in. I need to teach her what a short vowel is. I need to teach her what the sounds of the consonants are. And so really meeting the children where they are is really, really important. We teach in a very systematic and explicit way where nothing is assumed and everything is taught. Although this isn't a reading skill, I do recall I was doing an assessment with a student who was again in 9th grade. And I said, how many days are in the year? And she said 156. And I said, okay, let's do it. And just teaching everything. It's again, systematic and explicit. Nothing is assumed and everything is taught. Everything has to be taught. So I assessed a 4th grader recently who her mom is like, something's not right. I know something's not right. She's starting to have stomach aches and she doesn't want to go to school. And so I had her come to my office and she read like a 4th grader. You gave her a passage and she sounded pretty fluent. She sounded smooth. But then I put the word lap in front of her with nothing else, no other context. It wasn't a predictable text. It was just the word lap. And she read it as lab. She read the word kit as cat. She read the word had as hand. These are simple 3-letter words, 3-sound words that she couldn't read in isolation, but she read this. The 2nd graders were extremely excited. They were going on a field trip to the city zoo with no errors. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And so our job was to give her lots and lots of formal and informal testing and say, okay, what is going on in this little girl's brain? And she doesn't have short A solid yet. She doesn't have her vowel solid, which is taught, mid-kindergarten to 1st grade. But she was surviving in 4th grade, very bright little girl, but really starting to feel like the pressures of school.
And that could do it. It's, when you're dealing with pressures and stress, that affects kids too. You don't see it on kids, I guess. It's not as easy to detect, but that'll that'll throw you off.
It will, absolutely. And all we want them to do is to be happy. So I'm a mom, and what do I want for my daughter? I want happiness for her. I want her to be kind, and kindness will come back to her. And for these little ones who come, my job, I have one of the hardest jobs in that I assess them, and I'm going to ask them for about an hour and a half, show me what you know, and then I'm going to figure out what you don't know yet, because that word's really important, what you don't know yet.
Yeah.
And then everything that is difficult, you're just showing me what I can do to be the best teacher for you. So thank you. Thank you for helping me know what to teach you. So thank you. And so my goal when the child leaves is to say, okay, what was the feedback? She had a lot of fun. And I'm like, that's great. And I always make sure, like if they do a full neuropsychoed evaluation, that I look through it and I say, okay, let me pick the highest number I can get on a bell curve. And if they're old enough, show them on a bell curve where they landed. Yes, their working memory might be in the 5th percentile, but if they have a strength that's above average, I'm going to share that with them. And I say, you know, my job is to tap into that part of your brain. And this whole reading thing, it's going to be great. You're going to be great.
Yeah, I love that positive approach too. And it was a great point you brought up, making it fun, because I feel like if it's not fun, it's hard to have a child engaged for, you know, longevity. Because I remember, I mean, I think even my own parents would be able to tell a story better than I can, but I think I came home from kindergarten, first day, either kindergarten, preschool, first day, and like came home, had dinner. The next morning, my parents get me to wake me up, and I just said, no, I'm not going today. I'm done. I'm not going anymore, you know? And they're like, well, what do you mean? And to me, I wasn't fun. I didn't have fun. It wasn't. And probably, especially the first day of school, you know, all of a sudden you're in this class full of kids and stuff. And I just said, I'm not going. Obviously I did, but
I'm so sorry. Kindergarten should be so much fun.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Well, I mean, honestly, it could have been, I don't really remember the factors, but you know, you're a kid, your first time, you're in a new environment, you know, you have all this stimuli all over the place for you, and you're meeting new faces, and you're just like out of your element completely. So it's probably stressful, but it definitely wasn't fun, you know? And that's so important, because even like in today, like people's jobs, you know, I mean, do you tend to, the most successful people are enjoying and having fun in what they're doing. And that's what makes them good at it, because it makes them keep doing it. And making things fun is like I feel like the antidote, the secret antidote to getting anybody, even a child. I don't think we're much different than them. We kind of act the same in that regard. What are some ways you're able to make things fun? You know, for the parents listening to this right now going, how do I make this fun? I'm so frustrated trying to read or get my child to do whatever. How do I make this fun? Do you have any remedies?
A trampoline. That'll help.
Yeah.
Honestly, no, I have a trampoline right next to me in my office, and almost every session starts out with a trampoline. And I have balance beams, and I have kids jump on pillows. It has to be fun. This is the hardest for them. Your question is a little challenging in that we as parents have a role to help our children in homework, but we often say to families, like, just enjoy reading with the child and don't necessarily force things and make it stressful. So we always say, just
don't force things.
Don't force it. I know that it's homework and you have to help get it done, but really making it fun, Danielle, you nailed it. It really is so important. And if a parent just reads to a child, I don't care if they're in 5th grade or 6th grade, still reading to a child is so important, because it's developing a love for reading and a love for language. So for parents, I would say play games and have as much fun as possible, and don't be stressful. What parents can do, especially for little ones, is to not use simple language and to use robust vocabulary. So I had my daughter, when she was 3 years old, I mean, she was saying, "Oh, mommy, you startled me," because I used the word startled.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't say boo boo. I'm like, "Oh, you have a bad scrape, or you scratched yourself."
That's a good point.
The other day I said, "Yeah. Oh, you mean it was a little inconsistent? Mommy, what does that mean?" I said, "Let me show you what consistent means." And she's like, "Oh, so it's not consistent." I said, "Exactly." So really focusing not so much on you have to be reading, just have fun with it and read to them and use robust language. Absolutely.
I like what you brought up in the beginning there, where you know, every session starts on the trampoline, or you're doing something fun, because that is literally what people do in the business world. Like the first 10 minutes of a meeting is you like bullshit. You talk about life. You talk about like happy hours, you talk about whatever, and then you get into the business meeting after, into the actual business. And that's actually it's so funny that you said that's what you practice too with children, because that makes so much sense. You're getting them, you're transitioning them from what they just came from, whether it's a a car ride with their parents, maybe a 30-40 minute ride, they're stretching their legs. You can't just sit them right down and and get to the reading. You're actually getting them to buy into it. That's a really good point.
Thank you. It's all about having fun. And I did mention the word games. I actually am creating reading games. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Here in the packaging. It's been a labor of love. But I had a student who was severely dyslexic. Now you can't even tell. I started seeing him when he was in 2nd grade. And his mother, she wasn't crying. There are lots of moms and dads who do call crying, but she wasn't crying, but she felt desperate. She knew he was so bright, but this reading thing wasn't just coming along. And so I first started seeing him when he was in 2nd grade, but 3 times a week. And then it was up to 4 times a week. And then he asked for more, like a 3rd grader asking for more. So we did 5 days a week, and we ended up doing 2-hour sessions a day.
Wow.
And he'd want more. And I'm like, no, like 2 hours a day is, I mean, talk about perseverance and determination from such a young person. But then his mom would be like, okay, what do you want us to do when we go home? And that's the village part, right? The reading village. This is when we do become a village.
It takes a village,
I had been playing my reading games for about 20 years now, but it wasn't until I met this young boy where I was like, I need to develop even more games. And so I am an artist who can do some really great, circles and some little spiked hair. I'm not an artist, but I started creating these characters for my reading games. And my friends were like, can I get a copy of that? Would you mind?
Good. They're like, yeah, it's good.
It's really good. I like it. And so what I found is that the mother was able to play these games, reinforce a specific skill that I just taught, and have fun. So I'm really excited to say we found an amazing graphic designer. We found an eco-friendly printer in New York, and the ball just started rolling. And I'm really, really happy. I'm now presenting the games to local schools and at conferences. I'm really, really excited about that.
That is awesome. Congrats on that. I was going to ask you about your reading games because I saw that and I was like, wow, this is cool, because it reminds me of just being like right back in school, but like, you can do that at home with your parents. And it's not something like, we're in such a digital world right now too, that it gives parents the ability to use something that's not also putting a screen in front of them. It is that traditional cards, I mean, I love that.
Thank you. It is really important for me to bring families together. And so I'm a big believer, and my husband is too, and I'm really happy, we're a team on this. My daughter doesn't have an iPad. And sometimes like, she'll be like, Mommy, can I see your phone? And I'm like, why do you want to touch my phone? Like what? Yeah. She's like, well, I want to send you a message. I'm like, that's okay, baby. Just tell me now. So getting them off of technology is really important, and laughing with each other. So the games are a little competitive, and why not make it a little fun, a little competitive? And in the end, all you're doing is reading. Yeah,
that's it. And that's something I don't even think like the kids are realizing. They are reading and learning without even realizing, like, they're not in a classroom with 25 people doing it.
Exactly.
Do you have a story that you can share with us to where maybe a parent comes to you, right, and they're just so distraught? I come home from work, I try to help them with their homework. It's just not working, to say the least. And, the kid and the parent, they're like not even getting along anymore, almost, because of how those homework fights, right? And then you come in, and then if you can give us an X amount of time too, maybe typically how long it could take. If you have a specific story, I'd love to hear just how that process was and how it ended, if you can.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'll continue the story I started sharing about the young boy whose mom came to me, who started seeing me 3 days a week, then 4 days a week, then 5 days a week. And so we worked together for 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. And now he is in high school. And he doesn't know this, and I'm not sharing his name, so it's okay to say, but his teacher actually texted me and said that they did end of year testing. And out of all of the kids in his grade, he scored the highest on the standardized testing.
Oh, wow.
And it just makes me so like, I'm like, literally, I was like, when I had happy tears, because I'm like, this boy, it was so hard. And now I look up at him. I saw him a couple days ago, and he's a man, and with this like deep voice now, and he's so tall. And like, we have this wonderful relationship, because I knew it was so hard for him. And while I was pregnant, he was reading to me 5 days a week. And so I said, honestly, my baby probably knew his voice better than anyone besides for me, because I was like, you're reading to my baby. Thank you so much. But here's this young man, and they're a wonderful family with 4 children, and 3 of the 4 children have either dyslexia, auditory processing, ADHD. So it really was, he is one of my greatest success stories. We have a lot, and I'm very happy to say, like, I have dads finding me on LinkedIn and be like, he's in Silicon Valley right now. And I'm like, I knew it. It's just that this reading piece and spelling piece may be very, very challenging when growing up. But I often say to parents, I'm not worried about your child at all. He's a beautiful soul. Yeah. And he's going to be a great dad one day, like, it. So this whole reading thing, it's really challenging now. And I'm not underestimating how hard it is. But in the scheme of life, I'm not worried about him.
Well, that is very, very impressive from him too, that he was the highest in the standardized testing, because if he was dyslexic and he was favored, his right side of his brain was favored, he's competing with people who might even be left brain favored. And those standardized tests are so designed to cater to the left side of your brain. And he's able to beat those odds and beat those people who are left brain favored, or the equilibrium's fine, like whatever it is, but he's beating them basically at their own game, how a test was designed for them, and the opposite for him, because if it was designed for him, it would be about arts and other things. So that is really impressive to hear.
I know. I was so proud of him. You can use a functional MRI to show that the type of instruction that we use, it changes the brain. And it's so cool to see how you would take basically a non-reader and turn them into a reader, and how our instruction does that. I mean, I always say to teachers, like, we have one of the most important jobs. Like, we're helping to change the brain, neuroplasticity at its best. Yeah.
The neurology behind it is fascinating. It really is fascinating. And just like listening to something like this, or like a TED Talk or something, where, I mean, it could really change your entire outlook on life and how you're used to practicing, especially if you're a teacher too, because what would you say to a teacher to who's listening right now to look out for in terms of trying to specify who in their classroom is dyslexic? Because if you have 1 out of 5, the numbers are 1 out of 5, like you said, right? I mean, you have 25 kids in that class. I mean, it's every single class. You almost have to have your light bulb on, looking out for these kids.
I was a teacher for 12 years, and I taught at a very small private school solely for children with language-based learning disabilities. I was very fortunate to be there. I learned so much there. I only had 13 kids, and it's not really fair to ask a teacher with 20 kids to have to follow this curriculum and then keep your eyes open, but we do need them to keep their eyes open. And it's not the teacher's fault that they haven't been trained. It's just not part of teacher training just yet. As an IDA board member, we're working on that. But I would say to really be diagnostic in teaching as much as possible, to say, they're able to do this task way slower, or this group is able to do the task much quicker than this one. What's going on? Let me talk to someone who may know something in this school. Yeah. So I would really just be aware of how long tasks take. So that is really important, because that could be very telling. And it's not true, like, oh, they're just a boy, they'll grow out of it. That's not true. So really be diagnostic in their teaching, and say, okay, what's going on. It's okay if I don't know what to do. Let me ask someone at the school who might know what to do.
Okay. Yeah. that
Don't
makes
wait.
sense.
Please don't wait.
Yeah.
It is so much harder to change the brain as the child gets older. If you can get it in first grade and second grade, you're in such a better path, and it's so much easier if you can do it at a younger age.
It makes sense. I mean, I think that's the same thing with anything, especially, I mean, even like behavior stuff, I mean, when you're able to get to it earlier, you really save yourself some time,
Absolutely.
and some heartache. So, Stacey, I have some on the bottom of our screen here. I have some information where people can find you guys. And, if you guys are interested in some of the reading games that can maybe even, not only for, maybe your child isn't dyslexic or doesn't have any problems, you want to order those anyway, because it's an awesome, super cool little activity you could do with your kids. I have some information at the bottom of the screen here where you can find it. But other than that, is there a certain place where maybe somebody can reach out for maybe like even whether it's a consultation or they could just get more information about you guys?
Absolutely. You could please email me. I love when parents reach out and teachers read. I find such joy. I love teaching children, but I love teaching teachers as well. So you can find me at Stacey@thereadingvillage.com. And yes, the reading games are for more than just a dyslexic child. Thank you for bringing that up. You have everything you need in these games to teach your pre-reader how to read. So you don't have to wait until there's failure, start early.
That is so important. Don't wait till failure. That is a really good, I'm glad you said that, because that makes a lot of sense.
Start early.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thanks for coming on, Stacey. I mean, this really has been a great conversation. I think it's productive. This topic is not going anywhere. I mean, people are still, we're obviously still going to always have kids, and that's just going to.
And adults with dyslexia.
Yes, that too. Even adults might be listening to this and going, oh, well, actually, I am an artist and I am just as cluttery as Picasso, and I'm using people's recycling, as my own artwork. So
and I might say, Daniel, you also might, I often ask parents, well, is there someone in the family who has dyslexia? But then more importantly, are there any late bloomers in the family? Oh, yes. My husband was a late bloomer because they weren't necessarily diagnosed, but reading was really hard. And now they're uber successful. So the late bloomer is often a good way to ask it.
That's a good word for it. Yeah, late bloomer. That's good. Well, thank you so much, Stacey. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to, we'll catch up down the road and see how things are going. You could tell us more of your success stories too.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Yes. Thank you, Stacey.
Every star